Have you ever had one of those days where you sit down to study, work, or finally do that thing you've been putting off for weeks? You open your laptop, you stare at the screen, you check one notification, then another. Suddenly, you're watching videos about penguins, celebrity drama, or how someone built a house in the middle of a forest. And somehow, 2 hours have disappeared. Now, the task is still waiting for you. The deadline is even closer. And somehow you feel worse than before. So you tell yourself, I'm just lazy. Maybe you've said that to yourself hundreds of times. Maybe you've looked at other people and thought, why can they get things done so easily while I struggle to start? But what if that's not true? What if laziness isn't actually the reason you're avoiding your work? Because according to psychologists, what we call laziness is often something completely different. And understanding that difference can completely change the way you see yourself. Most people think procrastination happens because they don't have enough discipline. They think successful people wake up every morning excited to work. They imagine successful students jumping out of bed excited to study. They imagine successful business owners feeling motivated every single day. But that's not how it works. Think about this. Have you ever cleaned your entire room instead of studying? Or organized your phone gallery instead of writing an assignment? Or spent 30 minutes choosing the perfect playlist before starting work? Or maybe you've suddenly decided that now is the perfect time to clean your desk, or make a snack, or check the weather, or answer messages you ignored all week. It's strange, isn't it? The moment you're supposed to do something important, suddenly everything else becomes interesting. That's the funny thing. You're not avoiding work. You're avoiding a specific task. If you were truly lazy, you wouldn't suddenly find the energy to reorganize your desk, make coffee, answer messages, and watch 15 videos. Your brain is active, very active. It's just running away from something. The question is, what is it running from? Here's something most people don't realize. Procrastination is usually an emotional problem, not a time management problem. Let's say you have an exam next week. You sit down with your textbook. You open the first page. And suddenly, you feel stressed. Not because you're studying, but because of what studying means. Maybe you're afraid you'll fail. Maybe you're worried you'll forget everything during the exam. Maybe you're worried other students understand the material better than you. Maybe you've already fallen behind and don't know where to begin. The task starts to feel huge. So huge that your brain doesn't even know where to start. And when that happens, your brain notices those uncomfortable feelings. Stress, fear, anxiety, overwhelm. And because your brain wants to protect you from discomfort, it looks for an escape. And guess what? Your phone is waiting. Social media is waiting. YouTube is waiting. Netflix is waiting. A quick scroll feels much easier than opening a textbook. And that's because these things give your brain a reward immediately. You open TikTok, you get entertainment immediately. You watch YouTube, you get entertainment immediately. You check messages, you get a little reward immediately. But studying doesn't work like that. When you study for 10 minutes, nothing exciting happens. When you study for 30 minutes, nothing exciting happens. The reward comes much later. Maybe next week. Maybe next month. Maybe when you pass the exam. And your brain loves immediate rewards. Imagine someone offers you $10 right now or $20 next month. A surprising number of people choose the $10 right now. Our brains naturally prefer immediate rewards. That's why scrolling for 10 minutes feels easier than reading one page of a textbook. It's not because you're weak. It's because your brain is choosing comfort right now over benefits later. Now here's another thing people rarely talk about. Sometimes the people who procrastinate the most are not lazy at all. They're perfectionists. Imagine you need to write an essay. You want it to be amazing. You want every sentence to sound intelligent. You want the teacher to be impressed. You want the final result to be perfect. But there's a problem. When your standards become too high, starting becomes scary. Because what if your first draft isn't perfect? What if it isn't good enough? What if people judge it? So instead of starting, you wait. You tell yourself you'll start later. Maybe after dinner. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe when you're feeling more motivated. Maybe when you're in the perfect mood. But that perfect moment never comes. Days pass. The deadline gets closer. The stress gets bigger. And suddenly you're writing the entire thing at 2 in the morning while questioning every life decision you've ever made. Sound familiar? Perfectionism often disguises itself as laziness. But in reality, you're not avoiding the work. You're avoiding the possibility of doing it badly. And that's a huge difference. Now let's talk about motivation. Because motivation is probably one of the most misunderstood things in the world. A lot of people wait until they feel motivated. They think, I'll start when I feel ready. The problem is that motivation usually comes after you start, not before. Think about going to the gym. Most people don't jump out of bed excited. Most people don't wake up thinking, I can't wait to exercise today. They put on their shoes. They start walking. Then they start exercising. Then motivation appears. The same thing happens with studying. The same thing happens with reading. The same thing happens with working. The same thing happens with learning a new skill. People often think motivation creates action. But in many cases, action creates motivation. Once you start, your brain realizes the task isn't as terrible as it imagined. That's why the hardest part is usually the first 5 minutes. Not the next 30 minutes, not the next hour. Just the first 5 minutes. Because that's the moment when you're fighting the resistance in your head. So the next time you call yourself lazy, stop for a second and ask yourself a different question. What am I actually avoiding? Am I afraid of failing? Am I overwhelmed? Am I trying to make everything perfect? Am I waiting for motivation? Am I choosing comfort over progress? Because most of the time, laziness isn't the real problem. Your brain is simply trying to avoid discomfort. And once you understand that, everything starts to make a little more sense. You stop seeing yourself as the enemy. You stop thinking you're broken. And instead, you start understanding what's actually happening. So here's a challenge. The next thing you've been putting off, don't promise yourself you'll finish it. Don't promise yourself you'll spend 3 hours doing it. Don't promise yourself you'll complete the entire project. Just do 5 minutes. That's it. 5 minutes. Open the document. Read 1 page. Write 1 paragraph. Solve 1 problem. Just start. Because starting is often the hardest part. And once you've started, continuing becomes much easier. You might be surprised how much progress can come from 5 simple minutes. And maybe, just maybe, you're not as lazy as you thought.